now, instead of having to do separate applications, it's all kind of lumped into one. So this is an example of government,
everybody sang Kumbaya and everybody was happy. It was great.
Welcome back to Landline Now. Despite the holidays, there's been quite a bit of trucking news in the headlines, from confusion about beneficial ownership information filings to congestion pricing and more. It's time to run down all the latest with the help of Mark Schremmer and Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine. Mark, Tyson, Happy New Year. Good to see you.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
Happy New Year. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Let's start, Tyson, with this beneficial ownership information reporting requirement. Pretty sure you got whiplash over the last week of 2024, because at one moment the courts had nixed the requirement, then it was back on and off. Super hard to keep track of where we stand now, I think, even then. But walk us through kind of the confusion, the frustrating journey, as it were, Tyson.
So pointed out, this is a confusing situation. So let's kind of go back just a little bit. So on December 3rd, a Texas federal district court pretty much filed put an order for a nationwide injunction on beneficial ownership information. So what that means is that nobody had to file BOI reports. That was going to be due January 1st for most for companies. And so that was the way it was going to be. And then just fast forward real quick to December 23rd, just 2 days before Christmas, and everyone got a lovely gift of that. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals overruled that district court injunction, which means that the BOI report is now back in the books for January 1st, just about, like a week before.
Right.
And then fast forward the day after Christmas, just 3 days later, and then a different panel for the same Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said, nah, just kidding. We're just
just joshing.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy that?
But yeah, it was a different panel, and then it put the nationwide injunction back into play. That is where we are at right now. And so, if you don't listen to anything I say, listen to this part, which is the beneficial ownership information reporting. It is not required right now as of this conversation. I checked the official website, which is finson.gov, and they have said as much, which is you do not have to report on this. They do encourage companies to file a report voluntarily, because this can change at any moment, as we have seen in recent weeks. Their advice is, if you're not just absolutely opposed to the idea of a BOI report, maybe just file it, because it really is, all you're doing is that you're submitting some information about you and your company. It takes less than an hour to do it. It's very easy to do. There is no filing fee. It's just a quick little data entry is all you're doing, and then you're done with it. That's all you got to do. And so, yeah.
And I'm sure there's people out there who did actually file when they thought this thing was on, and that's okay as well.
Yeah, I've talked to an individual driver back and forth over this past 2 weeks while this has been going on, and what he's kept on, he's asking, okay, is this on? Is it off? What am I supposed to do? And I think, within that, at one of the points, he just went ahead and got it filed. He talked to his attorney and got it filed. But there's a lot of people that think it's overly intrusive, and so if you land in that side of it, right now, like Tyson said, you don't have to do it. So you can't hold off, but be paying attention,
right?
Because once they do put it into effect, if they do, those penalties and fines for not being filed are pretty substantial once that goes into effect.
Yeah, and I understand the concerns too. The U.S. Treasury Department was hacked, I think, by Chinese hackers recently. So I understand, the reticence to maybe kind of put this information out there, but good point there, because the whiplash will probably continue. At some point, we're probably going to see this thing go back into effect, perhaps, and maybe. Who knows? We'll see what happens. This is probably a good example of the ways in which government isn't the most efficient when you've got this kind of back and forth.
Sure.
But in some cases, things can go pretty quickly. Mark, a bill called the Transportation Security Screening Modernization Act, previously introduced in both chambers of Congress, has been signed into law by President Biden. First, some background on this bill. It's pretty simple, and the goal of this is to simplify things, right?
Yeah. So basically, truckers on hazmat, threat assessments and those type of background checks where basically there was a lot of redundancy. They're paying for those things multiple times. And so now we've just reduced it, streamlined it down to one thing. You talk about inefficiency of government. And this is such a breath of fresh air because it was a bipartisan bill. It was introduced by Republicans, signed by Democratic President Biden into law. And it's also, even in the trucking industry, everybody kind of just called it common sense. That OIDA called it common sense. ATA also supported it. International Brotherhood of Teamsters also supported it. That's not that often when you get all those things together, everybody saying something. And it's basically because it is common sense. It's not making it any more likely for any sort of threat to bleed in. It's just reducing the redundancy and, costs that shouldn't fall down to the truck driver.
Yeah, again, there were separate applications for TWIC, for transportation worker identification credential, hazardous materials endorsements, that kind of thing. Security threat assessments already made for those. Now, instead of having to do separate applications, it's all kind of lumped into one. So this is an example of government,
everybody sang Kumbaya and everybody was happy. It was great.
World peace is next. Let's hope. Yeah, so good news there, and I'm sure this will affect, quite a few people out there who are listening and make their lives a little bit easier, which is a good thing. Let's talk. We'll go back on the other side of this pendulum, I guess, here. New York City congestion pricing. Speaking of whiplash, This was another thing from 2024 that kind of went back and forth. It was pulled over the summer by Governor Kathy Hochul. She really fast-tracked this thing near the end of 2024, and it's back on now.
Yeah, it is back on. So, on Sunday, January 5th, congestion pricing will begin south of 60th Street in Manhattan, New York, as of this conversation.
Okay, yeah.
This is another situation similar to the beneficial ownership information with the 11th hour court ruling. So, on December 30th, what happened was a federal court judge in the New Jersey courtroom basically ruled on New Jersey's federal lawsuit. So real quick, there's about 9 federal lawsuits challenging congestion pricing, all but 2 of which are in a New York federal court. These 2 are in New Jersey. So the New York lawsuits, the judges have found that basically dismissed most of their claims. The New Jersey case had yet to be filed or to be ruled on until recently, when the court basically said dismissed basically all but one of New Jersey's claims, which New Jersey complained about unfair. So basically, what happened was that during when this was all being figured out, the Federal Highway Administration gave the Bronx a certain amount of money, but they didn't give any New Jersey cities a certain specific amount of money to mitigate the increase in traffic. So basically, the argument here was, why did you give special attention to New York cities but not New Jersey cities that are affected? And so what the federal judge said is, good point. The federal government has 2 weeks to file something with the courts to kind of give us an explanation as to why there's that discrepancy between New Jersey cities versus New York cities. That being said, that was December 30th. On that same day, both New York and New Jersey claimed victory in that court ruling, with New York saying, well, we won, so we're going to move forward with congestion pricing on January 5th. And New Jersey attorney said, yeah, no, we won. And so therefore, congestion pricing has to be paused until we resolve this issue that this court recognized. So kind of make this already long story short, congestion pricing will begin on January 5th, okay?
Probably.
But New Jersey filed an emergency motion for clarification and preliminary injunction. So we are recording this on Friday morning, on January 3rd. The court is going to have a hearing on that at 3 p.m. on Friday to rule on that. Every indication is that the court is going to say, congestion pricing can move forward while we settle this issue. With that being said, I know that the last of the filings are due in mid-February, so we might not have an actual answer to the question until maybe towards the end of February, maybe March. But until then, there's every indication that congestion pricing will move forward. and then that's the way it's going to be until the court says explicitly otherwise.
I guess if you're going to look for good news in this, it's that they did reduce the rates,
Yes.
right? By about 40%, I think, across the board. I can't remember the exact numbers, but
Yep.
the total for a heavy truck passing through this area was going to be pretty hefty. It's still pretty hefty, don't get me wrong,
Right.
but it is lower, right?
It's $21.60 to get into that area. And by the way, truckers will be charged every single time they enter and re-enter that zone, whereas passenger vehicles only have to pay it once a day. That's a whole different lawsuit that the Trucking Associations of New York is fighting against as well.
Okay, so maybe not good news, but it is less, I guess. But yeah, that is not good news by any means. But again, stay tuned to us. Check landline.media because you're keeping an eye on this and keeping updates going out there because this is another, again, example of whiplash there. Let's move to a couple other stories here real quick before we say goodbye for the moment here. Advanced clean trucks rules in effect in 5 states this year, Tyson, despite quite a bit of opposition, right?
Yeah, so there are some challenges to that, some legal challenges in the federal court. But again, with this, all you need to know is that in 5 states, I don't have it at the top of my head. I know it's New York, Washington, Oregon, Massachusetts, and I'm missing another one.
Yeah.
But at any rate, that is going to happen. There are efforts to put at least a 2-year delay on the implementation of advanced clean trucks. Every single one of those have been unsuccessful. And so in those states, basically what it means is that there has to be a 7% of new truck sales have to be zero emissions from the manufacturer side. That's being trickled down to the dealers, who are pretty much they're being forced to sell at least one electric truck before they can sell I think it's 200 or before they can buy 200 diesel trucks.
Yeah.
That's causing a lot of problems because some dealers are having trouble selling a single electric vehicle because there just is no demand for Class 8 zero emission tractors. So that's also a developing story. So we'll kind of see how some of these challenges are going to shape out in both the courtroom and in front of federal law or state lawmakers to do something about it.
We're going to give you an honorary law degree, Tyson, just because
Right?
you've been tracking all this over the past several weeks. I mean, it's impressive, and I'm sure you've accumulated a few gray hairs. You look pretty good right
A little
now,
bit,
but
no, I'm good.
But doing all right. Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, and Washington are those 5 states that have put it into effect with the turn of the calendar into 2025. Real quick here before we go, Mark, broker transparency. We've talked about this, and we talked about this earlier with Louie and Todd. But the push to get comments out there, it's in full force.
Yeah, the stretch run is definitely in effect. January 21st is the deadline to file comments. Right now, there's about 2,000 filed. That's a great number so far, but at the same time, could use a lot more comments. When you consider this is an issue that goes back to truckers, hundreds of truck drivers going to Washington, D.C. protesting all the way back in May 2020. So we're finally here. President Trump will take office January 20th. The 21st, that's the day the deadline ends on it. So, he was back in 2020, gave some positive comments about this and said this was something that he would get done for truck drivers. And now it's right in front of him. So that would be, it's a great time to file those comments. And OIDA is doing everything it can to help make that happen.
Yeah, that fireside chat again on January 8th, Wednesday at
7:30 Central.
Thank you for that. And 5:30 Pacific, obviously 8:30 Eastern, and the comments due on January 21st. We'll keep an eye on that. Tyson, Mark, we appreciate your time as always.